right, hello, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. My name is Federico Hernandez, and I'm here today with Benoit Bail. He's the brand ambassador for Depaz rum, but he also has many other hats, which is super good. I'm going to really quickly share today's presentation. Here he goes. All right. Actually, first of all, I want to say sorry to everybody who was going to join us last week and we were not able to. I was in Nicaragua, so I was having a little bit of issues with connection. Actually, the same day that I was going to do a presentation, they cut off the electricity, so it's not going to happen. So thank you for being here with us today. Really quickly, if you're joining,
you don't say that you just were on vacation actually, and you didn't want to go online, right?
Yes, but I was ready. I had everything with me ready to do a great presentation. It's already in my agenda. But it could happen. Doesn't mean what you're saying could happen. I could actually, it could happen, but it hasn't happened. All right, really quickly, for everybody who's joining us here right now, which is great. I'm seeing a lot of people already. Hi, John. Hi, Dave. Hi, Richard. Hi, Brad, Shad. Everybody who's saying Ether, Bombari, Ruben, Austin, Daphna, and everybody else who's saying hi from different parts of the world. As you can see, we have a chat box to your right. If you're seeing us right actually in Facebook or YouTube, go to Zavvy, which is zavvy.co, where you can participate here and from the chat box. And if you have any questions, where it says ask questions in the very bottom, put your questions during the event. Today's presentation is going to be around 30-40 minutes. Let's see it, and then we'll talk about, share some contact information, and then do our Q&A. I see the House of Rum from Martinique is here. Meredith, great to see you as well. All right, so today's topic is understanding Agricole Rhum with Depaz rum brand ambassador Benoit Bail. We were having this conversation because Benoit is how you pronounce it in French, but if a Latino will pronounce it Benoit, because you have B-E-N-O-I. The I has like a apostrophe and then T. But he told me if I'm going to call Benoit, told me that I'm going to call him Spanish, tell him Benito. I'm like, all right, sure.
It's the Latino version, so.
You have different hats, which is true also. Yeah. Today, actually, what we're talking about, of course, is talking about Agricole Rhum. And so we did a live stream today, not a live stream, we did an infographics. We have 2 infographics that we're launching. This is part 1, and focus on Agricole Rhum. And it's being curated by the Conference of Rum, which is Benoit is also part of, and it's a huge social media platform in Facebook with over 40,000 members, if I'm not mistaken. Very active. And he also organizes the Agricole Tour in the US, where he educates different F&B locations or companies, same about Agricole Rhum, and he also participates in the US rum festivals that we do with a booth and different rum brands that are trying to start in that market as well. Yeah. But really quickly, before we start talking about this, let's do a quick introduction to Benoit, so everybody can see him. He's nice, nicely shaved and clean cut. It's always like. This is so Benoit, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so basically, as you just mentioned, I'm the brand ambassador for the Depaz Rums, but I'm also hosting a project with my associate Jerry Gitani, who I'm traveling a lot with. Well, we used to travel a lot before COVID, of course, to make the Agricole Tour, which, as you mentioned, is a project in which we go to different, not only to the United States, but to actually a lot of countries in the world and to a lot of rum fests to educate people about Agricole Rhum in partnership with some rum brands from the French West Islands, Martinique, Guadeloupe, French Guiana. Yeah, besides this, of course, I'm also the founder of La Confrérie du Rhum, which is this Facebook group you just talked about, which has over 45,000 people right now. And we do a lot of stuff. Of course, we talk about rum 24/7, but we also do private bottlings for the group with some brands, etc. So it's actually quite nice to join on Facebook. It's mostly in French, of course, but still nowadays Facebook is translating everything by itself, so it's quite easy to follow up conversations. Yeah, and besides this, I'm also the co-organizer from the Rum Fest in a very nice wine city of Bordeaux in France.
That's excellent. That's excellent. I consider myself very like an entrepreneur, but I see Benoit, like, he takes it to the next level, and then his.
Oh yeah, no, that's not true. I mean, I got you on my eye as well. You're very huge on that level, hosting several rum fests in several cities in all the US. Beside all the other stuff you do, is huge. So no, I mean, I'm impressed. Don't put it the other way.
All right, let's talk about rum, and let's talk about Martinique rum. Let's talk about Agricole Rhum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is so what we did with the infographic. We took different screenshots of different topics, and we'll go through them one by one. And then I think what we're gonna do before we have this, we just like a good intro. We have a video from Depaz Distillery, Rum Depaz, and then we'll show it. And then I think this is a good way to get motivated. So that's the first section of the video. We'll show the second part a little bit later. But it gets you on the vibe, right? And you're like, all right, even the music is like perfect. I'm like, oh,
island vibes.
Yeah. I love it. So Benoit, can you tell us a little bit? Let's talk about like the basics of rum agricole, right? And or agriculture rum.
Right. There are a lot of things that are mistaken actually about agricole rum. So just to make it clear, of course, I'm always going to talk in a very French or European point of view. Basically, you have two types. Let's make it very easy. Two types of rums. You have molasses rums, and on the other side, you have rums made out of sugarcane juice. So not out of molasses, even if it's still a very small part of the world rum production. They're there. It's a niche, but a niche that's growing over the latest years. And so you have the rums made out of sugarcane juice, and these rums can be made everywhere in the world where you grow sugarcane, right? Which makes it quite easy. As soon as you grow sugarcane, you can press out the juice out of it, ferment it, and distill it, and there you go. You have some rum made out of sugarcane juice. That doesn't, according to European law, that doesn't make it agricole rum by the same way. That's not enough. Why? Because agricole rum is even something more specific. Agricole rum has to be produced on French territories like Martinique, Guadeloupe, French Guiana, or Reunion Island, and on the Portuguese island of Madeira. These are, according to European law, again, the 5 only places in the world that are authorized to call their rums made out of sugarcane juice agricole rum. So rums from Mauritius, for instance, or from Australia, or made in the US or Hawaii, even if they are made in the same way, made out of sugarcane juice, are not allowed to be sold on the European market as Agricole Rhum and be labeled as such. So that's the big difference. We could take Clairin, for instance, which is also partially, well, some Clairins are made out of sugarcane juice, but that's one word specifically made for rums produced in Haiti. You have cachaça, which is also made out of sugarcane juice, which is specifically made for Brazil. So Agricole is basically the same, but for the French territories and the Portuguese island of Madeira.
That's and why Madeira?
They asked for it back in the beginning of the 90s. So this rule, this European law actually came out in 1989 for the first time. And at the beginning, it was just for the French territories. And like 2 or 3 years later, the Portuguese made, asked to be part of this as well, to have the protection, since they were also making rum out of sugarcane juice long time before. And since the French had protection, they said, well, we are part of Europe as well. We want the same protection. In the same way, the Canarian Islands, part of Spain, just as much as I know, also asked to be part of it a couple of years ago. It didn't pass yet, but I think it will pass in the next couple of years. But yeah, these islands asked for it as well, since they are also European and they want the same protection on the European market.
And what about Mauritius?
Mauritius is not part of Europe, so they are not allowed to use it. So that's also why in the beginning they tried, because they didn't know about that law. And once they came on the European market with their products labeled Agricole Rhum, when they were made out of sugarcane juice, of course, because they also have a part of their rums made out of molasses. What happened is that the Agricole Rhum producers went to governments and they said, well, these guys are not part of the law. They are not allowed to do that. They are breaking our market. And it's basically to save the market and also to guarantee a certain quality that they do in this. A lot of new distilleries nowadays, everywhere in the world, are pretending making Agricole Rhum because the rum is just made out of sugarcane juice. Okay, so you open a distillery in 2013, so like 7, 8 years ago, and you still pretend to create Agricole Rhum, when on the other hand, you have distilleries doing exactly this type of rum for like 100, 150 years. So they don't only do rum with sugarcane juice, they also have the knowledge and what we call in French savoir-faire, the know-how to make that in a special way that they claim their own, and also which makes the difference in quality versus new brands or new rums that just come on the market. I mean, Mauritius restarted doing Agricole Rhum only like 20 years ago in the beginning of the 2000s. And that's why they are considered as not having the know-how, even if their rums are good. I mean, I'm not saying their rums are not good, okay? But maybe the Agricole producers don't consider them as having the know-how to make Agricole Rhum on the same level as they do.
Understood. All right, let's talk about Martinique a little bit, because there's a lot of history here. In the Caribbean islands, you had the majority were like either Taínos, Caribs, Arawak. Those were the main Indians, native Indians. And I always think when I talk about like the native Indians, it would have been really nice if we would have kept some of that language. Like in Puerto Rico, we don't have anything. So we have names, the islands, some things, or some sounds. But that language, something that I actually, when I went to Mexico and I saw that people in the Mayo region talk Mayan, I was like, wow, that's beautiful, right? That's it would have been nice to maintain that. But let's talk about Martinique.
Well, that's basically all gone in Martinique as well. In Martinique, you still have some words popping up here and there, names of some locations maybe, or brands taking very old words they found in some documents, but nobody's speaking any local native language anymore. And yeah, these people are gone for a very, very long time now. And I guess this culture is almost completely lost. Even if recently, now last December, a typical native graveyard has been found under a church in Martinique, a church that has been destroyed over the last year because they wanted to renew the location, and they found a typical native graveyard on exactly on the same place.
Wow.
Yeah, it's impressive. So they are digging into it and managed to find a lot of stuff from back then. I'm not sure if there were bones involved from people, but they found like old pots and also the traces of old huts and everything under the ground. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's gonna be like now like they're gonna protect it, right? I imagine as a.
Well, yeah. So all the construction has been stopped because they found this actually. So they have to treat this first, and the construction maybe can take on afterwards.
Yeah. So Martinique was first discovered by Christopher Columbus in 1502, right around that.
Right.
But it was the French later came. I understand that basically in 1635, the island was claimed by the French,
Exactly.
And then there was a small period of time that there were wars during the Napoleonic War, and it belonged to the British for a little period of time, and then
about 20 years.
Yeah. For 20 years.
About, yeah.
Roughly. Oh wow, 20 years is a lot. And then the French reclaimed the island again. And then it became a department of France,
Right.
and then which is super interesting. And then it was basically sugarcane that was like one of the main horses or economical horses for the island, and then many opportunities and techniques came in. I remember like reading the book of like yo 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 in a book of yeah, you know the book I mean, and a bottle of rum. Yeah. And it talks about in the history that like the influence that the French had in rum, right? At some point in the book, which is really interesting. But if you can tell us a little bit about the history of like whatever you know about Agricole Rhum and French and Martinique as a history.
Well, basically, the history about Martinique is the same like all over the Caribbean. At some point, you had some colonialists that came over, in this case, French, which have been there for most of the time, except these 20 years during the war with the British. And the rest of the time they have been there. Of course, they have been practicing slavery like anywhere else for all the sugar production, for the sugar industry. So planting sugarcane. And about around just after Napoleon, so during the 19th century, what happened is that the sugar crisis in Europe, because since it was part of France and still is nowadays, so a lot of people don't know that, but Martinique, the same way as Guadeloupe or French Guiana, are French departments. So it is France as much as Paris is. It's not an old colony or an island that depends from France. No, it is part of France. So if you go there, you are in Europe, basically. So it's pieces of Europe in the Caribbean. And that makes it really fantastic. And a lot of people don't know that. So you have to consider that. And so in about middle of the 19th century, there has been a big sugar crisis in Europe. So we discovered, the European discovered beet sugar and started doing it. So there was no interest anymore into sugar coming from the Caribbean, and the French were sitting on big stocks of sugarcane, and they started deciding to stop producing sugar. So all the small plantations started getting centralized and putting all the efforts together in very big factories where they started creating rum instead of sugar out of the sugarcane juice. And that's how Agricole was Agricole Rhum was born. And so basically that's the story. And it has been on since that period. So in the beginning, they have been doing both. They also did some rum out of syrup, because they didn't necessarily have the capacity to stock all that sugarcane juice that rots quite fast. I mean, even nowadays, if you cut a sugarcane, you have to press it in maximum 2 days. If you don't it would start to rot on the spot. So
everything
happened fast. And back then they didn't have very big stainless steel tanks or anything else where they could put all the sugarcane juice inside. So they started boiling it and making syrup out of it, and then producing syrup, rum out of the syrup. And most of them have been doing this, let's say, up to the 40s. And just during World War II and a little bit after, they started quitting all the syrup things and industrialized Agricole Rhum, basically, out of sugarcane juice.
So around the 40s, they stopped doing. It became more industrial,
right?
But at the same time, you had better equipment to do this.
Exactly.
Yeah, understood. That's super interesting. I didn't know about the sugarcane honey or sugarcane syrup. That's really interesting.
Not that much people know about it, and actually, we didn't have much occasions to try it. But nowadays, you still can find some bottles from that period. Specifically with some brands like St. James, of course, which has the oldest rum Agricole vintage that has been on the market, the very first from 1885, which you can still find today. And you have old bottles in between up to the 1940s. Exactly the same for brands like Bali or even Depaz. You have a Depaz 1929 that exists, and you still can find some bottles here and there on auctions. And I've been lucky enough to try different bottles.
Benoit, are you there? Benoit, you froze 1 second. Let me send Benoit a quick message. I don't think he knows. There we go.
Sorry. I don't know what happened. So as I said, I was lucky enough to try rums back from that period, actually, from several brands. And something is sure, the quality in between those brands was actually quite the same. But you can notice very, very big differences from rums from back then and right now. And you can even notice that this hasn't been made out of sugarcane juice, but rather from syrup, I'd say.
So you don't get that Agricole, like the grassy
the freshness? No, you don't have that. You don't have it. It's much sweeter, I'd say, rounder, like rums made out of syrup, actually, and that's quite interesting. It's very, very interesting, especially since those brands still exist nowadays and completely changed their way of producing rum.
Exactly, and Zacapa is a perfect example, right? That they do it.
Yeah, right.
Sugarcane honey. All right, let's go to the next. It talks about something about the process distillation. You actually, there's another slide here that you were talking about. It's like the birth of Agricole Rhum, Rum Agricole, right? And you were saying that you were sharing that with the sugarcane industry just dying and beet coming out, Martinique is trying to find a way how to like distill rum, right? Over. And then this is how basically Agricole came to be, which is super interesting. And then, but let's talk about now the distillation process, right? And tell us a little bit, because something what's amazing for me today from the Agricole Rhum made that are following the AOC, and this is I have a question for this, is that after the distillation process, once that season is over, all the distilleries take all their stills apart and clean them, which is, I think that's a huge project.
It is.
And so we're talking about massive stills. And so, go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, something we haven't said is that we described the Agricole Rhum just before, but there's how would I say, a subcategory to this, which is AOC Agricole Rhum. AOC is basically the equivalency to a GI as we know it for Barbados or Jamaica. It's a trendy topic. You have a GI for Guadeloupe, where you have another one for Reunion Island, you have one for French Guiana. And in Martinique, you don't have a GI per se, but you have something even stronger, which is an AOC, meaning Appellation d'origine contrôlée, something you can also find in the wine industry in France, or even for cheese. So typical French thing. I know that Italians have that things as well for some of their products, but well, let's say it's a typical French thing. It is, even nowadays, probably the strongest regulation in the rum industry, but also one of the strongest regulations in the spirits industry in general. I mean, if we put next to each other all the different regulations you have, the AOC in Martinique is definitely one of the strongest one. One quick example would be to compare it with the Scotch whiskey industry, which allows you to get the grain from wherever you want. Okay, in the case of Martinique, no, you have to use the sugarcane from the island, and not from all the island, but only from 23 specific districts of the island. So it's very, very precise. And in this AOC, which is 6 pages of French law telling you how you're supposed to make rum to get that AOC label and label it as like this on your bottle as proof of quality, is that you have 6 pages of French law and rules and regulation about how to make rum, starting of what type of sugarcane to use, because there are hundreds of sugarcane varieties in the world, but in the French AOC, you're only allowed to use, well, until recently it was 15. I think now it's a bit more, but only 15 different types, which isn't that much, finally. The zones where you're allowed to grow your sugarcane are restricted. The type of wood you're allowed to use, the sizes of the barrels, the type of still you're allowed to use, and so on and so on. There are so many, many rules to follow to make proper rum, but to guarantee you this one and unique AOC flavor. And the flavor is something very important too, because if I'm an AOC rum producer like Depaz and I want to bring a new product or even a new batch of, might it be white rum, on the market, the batch has to be controlled and blind tasted by a committee jury that gets together, tastes all the new products or new batches coming on the market each year, and decides if yes or no the product is accepted to get this AOC label in this case. And they do that all the time, again and again. So basically, it's not only rules, but it also has a typical AOC flavor. And to guarantee this flavor, they have to blind taste this. So now to get back to your question about distillation process, indeed, the AOC says that you're not allowed to use pot still. So it's only going to be column still, but one specific column called a Creole column, which has a specific amount of plates. And so you're basically only allowed to harvest your sugarcane and to produce rum from January 15 to July 15, so roughly 6 months in the year. The other 6 months, you're not allowed to produce. So you're not allowed to harvest, you're not allowed to do anything. You let your sugarcane grow, and that's it. And in the meantime, what the distilleries do is that they take apart, as you said, the whole column, but not only the column, also the crushing mills, which are very, very heavy. So they get there with cranes and get all the pieces that are fixed together from each other and clean everything during this 6 months, and then put it back together every year to have clean material to start the crop with.
Okay, I have a question for you. With the still, can it be a copper still, or can it be like, it doesn't really matter like the material that is? So
it matters what material. You're allowed to use stainless steel and copper.
Okay.
So there's only one, I think, which is Naison, that they are only using they're using only copper in this still. It's a full copper still. All the other ones are mixing both materials.
Interesting. So, like for example, one section could be copper, the other one can be steel.
Yeah, most of the time they have the lower section made out of stainless steel and the upper section in copper.
Wow, that's super interesting. Though I'm gonna jump a little bit to the Agricole part because I wanna before I forget. Where's the AOC? AOC. Okay, you're talking about the AOC. With the AOC, you were mentioning that's the style that you have specific areas, specific strains in Martinique. So the same thing happens. There's an AOC restriction for Guadeloupe, and they are also able to use rum from a specific area.
No. Guadeloupe has a simple GI, which is very less restrictive than the AOC is. So they are allowed to do much more things. They are basically allowed to grow wherever they want on Guadeloupe and so on. So their rules actually fit on one page. That's quite easy. It's very less restrictive. Back then in '96, when before, because the basic idea from creating an AOC actually showed up for the very first time in 1972. So they needed 25 years to put it on point and bring it out finally on November 5th, 1996. This is the date where the AOC came out and started ruling. And during all this period, Guadeloupe has been asked to join the AOC to have a common regulation for both islands, but they refused because they considered that it was too restrictive for them and didn't give them enough freedom in their productions.
Understood. Are there other islands, French territory islands, that do the same process as Martinique, or is it only Martinique?
No, it's unique. It's unique in the French islands and even in the world, I'd say.
And there is the option of it's something that happens that some distilleries either do some expressions that are not under the AOC guideline, or there are distilleries that are in Martinique but are not part of the AOC. Is that
you have both. You have both. Now about distilleries producing AOC rum, there are some rums in their range that are not AOC, because even if you produce AOC rums, you are not forced to produce only AOC rums. So sometimes you may have some rums with profiles that doesn't fit into the AOC, and then you're still allowed to release them under your brand, but you're not allowed to release them under the AOC label, which also means that if it's not under the AOC label, you are not allowed to mention the term Martinique on the label anywhere.
Oh.
So it becomes rum from the French West Indies, but not anymore from Martinique, not even on the address of the company on the back label, which is you're allowed to put a postal code or something, a zip code, but no mention of the word Martinique on the label if it's not AOC. So this happens, of course. I take a very easy example. The AOC doesn't says that you're not allowed to add anything into your rums in terms of sugar, caramel, spices, or whatever. And some brands released spice rums. So these spiced rums, even if they are under the same brand, are not under the AOC. You have the same thing until recently. Finishes were not allowed under the AOC either, and you had some brands, including Depaz with their podcast finish, which were not allowed to put the AOC on the label because these rums have been finished in some other products, and the finish was considered as an additive to the rum, even if it's very, very tiny. And since 2020, now they are allowed to put finishes under the AOC as long as the part that comes to the rum from the previous spirit in the cask doesn't get over 2% of the total product. So this is about the brands making AOC rum. And of course, you have some other distilleries on the island. 3 actually for now. Some more are supposed to come in the next year, over the next years. But and 2 from those 3 are not part of the AOC, they are very recent because they are making pot still, and pot still is not allowed under the AOC. So they are basically making Agricole, since they are making rum from sugarcane juice on Martinique, which is one island from this list allowed to make rum Agricole, but they are not AOC Agricole rum because they're making rum out of pot still. So
that's super interesting. And
it's tricky. It's very technical and tricky, but once you handle it and you get through the whole stuff, you can put everything in the right box.
No, but I imagine the origin of rum being made in Martinique at the very beginning was done through right through pot still, not from column still, right?
That's definitely. I mean, column still came much later, actually, during the industrial period in the 19th century. Before that, it was like anywhere else in the Caribbean, making rum out of molasses in pot still, of course.
You something that you mentioned was the validation process of like a board that is tasting different new rums, just to make sure that if it qualifies. But this is only for new rums, or every company, once they do their batch at the end of the season, they have to send this rum to be qualified?
Every batch that's supposed to be bottled and released at some point, and I'm talking even batches from basic references like an XO from Depaz, for instance, has to be judged by this neutral committee, specially trained for this. And until 2 years ago, there was no other AOC, not even in Cognac in France, that was practicing this. But the reason why they made this was to guarantee one unique and specific AOC taste, which you cannot find anywhere else in the world. And that's what they wanted to guarantee with this. And yes, they have to taste, every time you have something, you send some samples to that committee, and they blind taste several samples in one day or one evening, and then validate that result. Yes, you're allowed to use it, or no, you're not.
It has to be very stressful, in my opinion, right? Let's say you're doing everything right, you did everything right, and for some reason they're like, nope, it's not, it doesn't qualify. You're like, no.
Yeah. And you're allowed to, when let's suppose you don't get the check, the validation from the AOC for some minor mistake, like there's something really minor, you're still allowed to correct the thing that went wrong twice. So you're allowed to correct the batch, send it back twice, and if after the second time it's not validated, you're not allowed to release it under the AOC, whatever happens. So, but if now, if it's a bigger mistake, like something is really weird in your product, you're not allowed to release it anyway, under the AOC label, of course. You can release it under your brand if you want to. So it has to be tasted, but it also has to be checked from the regulations. For instance, about fermentation. Fermentation is very important for distillation process, and the fermentation under the AOC has to be between 24 hours and 120 hours. So basically between 1 and 5 days. If you go above this, so 6-7 days of fermentation, you're not allowed to put it under the AOC. Even if all the rest you do is right, this is not going to work.
Yeah, that's extremely interesting. Like I was like, it could be stressful, a lot of regulation, but it's just maintaining a control, right?
Exactly.
And it creates a uniqueness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go. The AOC, if I'm not mistaken, you have 3 classifications of rum. Is this correct? Or there's more? Like here tells
a little bit more, actually. Yeah. So you have 3 basic classifications, which is white rum, what we would call élevé sous bois, which is the equivalent to gold rum, and aged rum. So white rum has to be made out of sugarcane juice, of course, and then be distillated and put to rest for at least 60 days in stainless steel tanks before being bottled and released. During this period, you can reduce your rum as well with water, of course, to basically 50-55% as they do in the French Caribbean. After that, you also have the gold rum, which is the Élevé sous bois. This one has to be aged for at least 12 months in wood. Might it be vats or casks? That doesn't matter. And then you have aged rum, which has to be aged in casks only, with a maximum capacity of 600 liters for at least 3 years. Everything has to be aged on Martinique Island, and the bottling from aged rum also has to be done on Martinique Island. So aged rum has to be bottled over there. White rum has not necessarily have to be bottled on Martinique. Sometimes some white rums, for some transport and economical reasons, are bottled in France. So they are shipped bulk to France and then reduced and bottled there. That can happen.
Understood. So the oak aged rum is, the clear thing is, in addition to just at least 12 months, but it can be aged on oak barrels or vats.
Right? But has to be oak. Even the vats has to be made out of oak.
Understood. And then the extra aged rum, 100% oak, has to be aged on oak cast barrels.
So the aged ones, yeah, for minimum 3 years. And then besides this, you also have the regulation. So aged rum is for minimum 3 years. Then you have the VSOP, which is minimum 4 years. And still, according to the AOC, the XO has to be aged for minimum 6 years. Of course, these are just minimum figures. Now, if we take the example from Depaz, the basic aged rum from Depaz is a bit, Depaz likes it to make things a bit special and a bit older. So the basic aged rum, which is supposed to be minimum 3 years according to the AOC, like this is the one we see on the right on this page, is basically a 4-year-old rum. So technically it's a VSOP, but we sell it as an aged because our VSOP is already 7 years old. So our VSOP is technically an XO, but we still sell it under the lower quality VSOP. And our XO, which is minimum, supposed to be minimum 6 years, is a blend from 8 to 10 years old, which is already a lot because you don't have to forget that in Martinique, which is a tropical island, you have a very high angel share, which is average about 8 to 10% a year, which is a lot. So 10 years in oak in Martinique, you lose a lot of liquid.
The past, let's talk about a little bit about the past. If it is one of the biggest distillery, right, at Martinique today?
It is one of the biggest, yeah, maybe the 3rd or 4th one out of 8. So it's not the biggest one, it's one of the biggest. The Depaz is very special because of its terroir and the soil it uses. Basically, the Depaz, as you could see in the video, Depaz is located on the side of a volcano. And this volcano erupted in 1902, and this is basically where the Depaz story began. Because it burned down the whole city of Saint-Pierre, where the Depaz is based. And this burning of the soil changed all the flora all around this territory and also the soil of it. Nowadays, we find sulfites inside of the soil, for example, which snakes don't like. And in Martinique, you have very, very dangerous snakes, but not in that area because this area is full of sulfites. And the snakes don't love that. So they actually went away. And even 100 years later, there's still no snake in the area, which shows us that this soil is very special and also very fertile because of the burning, of course, and makes really the difference during all our harvests from the different sugarcane types we're using on the plantation.
Understood. I think let's take the opportunity to see the second part of the video.
Right.
Yeah. I think Benoit likes to show this video because he can show his second home, and then
Yeah, exactly. I wish this was my second home.
no, but it's amazing, and like how massive it is, or looks massive. And then
It is nowadays the only estate rum which is completely how could I say it? Which doesn't need help from outside. I mean, we are planting our own sugarcane. We're distilling everything ourselves. We are doing everything ourselves. We are completely in autonomy, and it's a very big estate, as you can see, with a castle and everything. And yeah, we are actually, I think, the only ones in Martinique that have the chance not to be in any need of outside resources to function.
Understood. The pasta is part of a group, a company. You guys produce other rums inside in the facility?
Yes. Well, Depaz is part of the. Well, first of all, Depaz also produces one second brand, which is Dillon, which is part of the same group, and we are also part of the group La Martiniquaise, Bardinet La Martiniquaise, which on the island also owned the St. James distillery, which also produced several brands like Bali, Héritier Matco, Hardy, and so on, and which owns a lot of different distilleries and spirits in the world. Of course, it's a very, very huge group.
Oh, cool. That's very cool. But okay, let's continue with the infographic. We talked about AOC, and now this is perfect because we can finish it off here with the talking about a little bit about the terroir. And I think it's a very common word right now being used, and it's like the sexy word to use.
Yeah.
But this is like, I think the basic comes from France, right?
Yeah, it's basically a term that comes from the wine industry, from the French wine industry. But a lot of people mistake it by using it only for the soil or the area where you produce your product. But it's much more than that. Terroir nowadays means, of course, the area and the soil, like we do at Depaz. We are doing our stuff in one specific area. We have a specific soil. We are the only ones doing this one. But there's also the know-how of the people that work there, which is not the same than the know-how from our neighbors at Naison or the other neighbors at GM on the other side of the mountain. So this is also a very important part of the terroir, which a lot of people tend to forget nowadays because it's much easier to talk about areas and soils than also know-how.
Understood. Well, let's jump. We have a couple questions. Let's dive into this.
I don't see the questions, so I guess you're reading them then.
Yes. Here's a beautiful picture the Benoit shared from the fields.
That's my desktop background, I swear. This is a picture where you can see a part of the Depaz estate. So in the front, you can see sugarcane fields from Depaz, okay. And in the back, it's the Montagne Pelée, which is the volcano, the only volcano on the line, which is still active nowadays.
Wow, it's just beautiful. If anybody wants more information, here's the website for Depaz.
Yeah.
At the same time, next week, I'm going to be doing a live stream. As I mentioned in the very beginning, I was in Nicaragua, and I got hosted by the Florida Cañas team, and we went to visit all the different parts of the distillery, the sugarcane mill, and it was really good. So I took different videos, and that's what I'm going to share. Basically, all the things that I recorded myself. Just a heads up, I'm really bad recording, so we'll see. Bear with me. As you know, the best way to support Savvy is, and if you don't know, is through our website, noblecane.com, which is super great. Thank you for everybody who's supporting us. We have really cool swag, and more brands can continue adding up to the platform. Or you can join over almost 100 people that join us on savvy.co or in our Patreon, where you have access to over 350 live streams, all educational, just like you're seeing right now, either from rum, whiskey, wine, cigars, but primarily rum, right? That's our forte. All right, let's go to our questions. Enough with the infomercial. All right, here we go. First questions that I have is from Dave Russell.
Hi, Dave.
And he's saying, can rum produced from fresh sugarcane juice in French Polynesia, ex Taha, be called agricole in Europe?
No, not yet. I know they're working on it, but they're not allowed to call it agricole yet.
Okay. Another question is, I have a bottle from A1710 that mentions Martinique on the front label.
Yeah.
Why is it allowed to mention Martinique if it's does not follow the AOC?
Because they are not allowed to do it, and this was probably a mistake. And I know that since these bottles have been released, some authorities paid them some visits and reminded them that they are not allowed to put the word Martinique on it. So I know these bottles are available here and there, and of course there's still some stock available, but legally they are not allowed to do it.
Excellent. Dave also is asking, since Nora Martinez is no longer the master blender for La Distillerie Depaz, do you expect some new directions for the Depaz rum or new expressions to appear?
Well, Nora is not there anymore. Nowadays, the new master blender, which is also a woman, is the previous master blender from A1710, which is called Stéphanie Dufour. And yes, new expressions are coming. Well, we just released new expressions in the 2 last years, actually. We came out with some different cask strengths, which haven't been done before, and which had a huge success. On the other hand, we came out with some new white rums, one parcellaire white rum, which is actually a white rum for which we use sugarcane from one plot only, so exactly from one field. And this one has been renewed this year, and we also came out with a second new white rum called Cuvée des Alizés, which also has some technical specificities. But no, a lot of new rums are coming over the next years. Of course, I'm not allowed to talk about it yet.
Come on, Benoit.
I'll come back soon. Now, I'll come back to you when I'm allowed, but right now I'm not allowed to talk about it.
No, I'm kidding. Another from Simone. Does Martinique have much land arable for sugarcane that is not being used for that purpose, that is outside of the approved department of the AOC rum?
Yes, they have, because they still have one sugar factory, which is about to close, unfortunately, but still is in operation right now. And of course, they also need a lot of sugarcane, and all the sugarcane they use is not coming from AOC zones.
Do you think that's interesting, right? If that sugar mill is going to close, hopefully they become that territory as AOC.
That's what they expect for.
You know who's going to buy it?
Well, big stakes. There are 2 big groups on the island which will probably fight over it, but so we don't know yet. Are
non-European distillers selling their products as Agricole in other countries away from Europe?
Yes, some do. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say any brands, but we're not blind. We also have internet access, so we see other brands calling their rums Agricole and selling them outside of Europe as Agricole, and they are made everywhere in the world, even French Polynesia, even if they're not allowed to do it. We have seen some brands from Africa, from Asia, from the United States, from Australia, and even from Japan, selling rum as Agricole rum, but they never did it in Europe, probably on purpose, because they knew that they couldn't get through the regulation barrier.
Understood. There actually here, Dave Russell put a comment into that question. It's like rum produced on the island of Tahiti, French Polynesians, are labeled as Agricole.
Yes, but they are not allowed to do it. So they might get in trouble if they continue doing it. Of course, this all takes time when Agricole producers do point a brand or do some reclamations to what they do. They call the customs, the local customs, and say, hey, there's a brand that's doing something they're not allowed to. Then these customs have to call the French government, which calls then the customs from the country or the island where this is produced. And so it takes a long time until all this is filed, and it's all administrative and very long, but they better be careful. I know that Agricole brands, especially from Martinique, are targeting them. They know about them, of course, but yeah, that's a war that's not going to end well. I have seen some brands suffering from it, some brands getting hit big time by authorities because the Martinican and even some people from Guadeloupe tried to defend the term Agricole, and even more the AOC. And yeah, just like champagne versus Apple, they win.
Thank you. Rums of the World is asking, is the Depaz distillery open for visitors and tours now?
Yes, it is. It is. I know that you don't need to have any specific documents anymore since June 9. So like last week to get in Martinique right now, COVID-wise. And the distillery has been just closed for 1 week in April, I think. And all the rest of the time it was open. Of course, you have restrictions and you have to follow several rules because of COVID. But basically, you can visit Depaz anytime.
Yeah. Thank you. Do you recommend washing cane before crushing? This is a question from Silvanus.
If I recommend it, yes, I do.
Okay.
I do. Sometimes what we do at Depaz is that we basically wash it during crushing. Means that there's water added to the cane, which cleans it automatically, and also adds water, of course, to the juice, which is then filtered through distillation. But it also gives the occasion to rehydrate the fibers from the sugarcane, the bagasse, so that you can press out more juice after it on the second, third, or even fourth mill afterwards. So water is needed for crushing sugarcane, indeed. And then, of course, you clean your sugarcane by the same way.
Interesting. It seems that Silvanus is from Guyana, Africa, and he has a question. It was like, what legislation can we comply with if we're producing rum from Guyana, Africa? Or Guana, Africa, sorry. Or Ghana, Africa.
From Ghana to sell. Okay, from Ghana. I know that they're making rum out of sugarcane juice in Ghana. I've tasted it. It's actually very nice what they do, but they won't be able to sell it as Agricole rum in Europe, even if they tried. I mean, Mauritius tried, they failed, and it's not open to other countries. So basically, if you want to sell your rum in Europe, you would have to call it sugarcane juice rum or pure cane rum, or I don't know, to find another word, but not Agricole. The same way you don't sell your rum with the name cachaça or clairin, for instance.
Yeah. So yeah, okay, let me close this one. Are negotiations happening in other markets to agree on a similar approach to EU for re-agricole?
We're trying with the help of the EU and of several governments, but it is really not easy to put it through because it's always based on exchange. Cognac or champagne are respected in the US, for instance, and when this has been dealt with and proposed to the US says, okay, but in exchange, we want you to recognize bourbon. So even if we would make whiskey out of corn here in Europe, which we do, we are not allowed to call it bourbon. So this works in both ways. And unfortunately, right now, there's nothing we can give countries like the US or any other territories in exchange for them to protect the term agricole. So it's all about negotiation, as always.
Dave is asking, please would Depaz please produce a Rhum Grande Arome?
No, because Grand Arôme is produced out of molasses, Dave, not out of sugarcane juice. I'm sorry. So that won't be possible.
And then Richard from New Zealand asking, markets as is that country authorities as part of regulations, trade agreement, etc., etc. I think this was part of his previous question. All right. Well, Benoit, thank you very much. This has been super great, super helpful. This actually, we took a 101 training right now about a little bit more than 101 training about Agricole Rhum and to learn more about Depaz Rhum as well. So we really appreciate your time to educate us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So hopefully we have another live stream to talk about part 2.
We could go on for hours like this, so no problem.
But once we set it up and we release it, we'll let everybody know. Hope to see everybody next week. Stay safe. I know everything is opening. Hope everybody can join me to my next Rum Festival, which is New York Rum Festival, August 21st, and then California on September 11th. Thank you, guys. Have a great Father's Day weekend, and bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
All right. Let's put our goodbye video, and we say goodbye.